We gather to discuss a profound and timeless truth. Betrayal is not merely an act committed against others. It is at its core an act committed against oneself. When individuals, groups, or institutions betray their own values, principles, or the trust placed in them, they set in motion a chain of events that inevitably leads to their own undoing. This is not a moral judgment, but an observation of the natural order of things. Betrayal in all its forms carries with it the seeds of destruction. Seeds that, once planted, grow into a harvest of consequences that cannot be escaped. Betrayal begins with a fracture, a crack in the foundation of integrity. It starts small, often unnoticed, as a compromise here, a lie there, or a silent justification for actions that deep down we know are wrong. But these small fractures accumulate, and over time, they weaken the very structure of our character. When we betray our own conscience, we create an internal conflict, a war within ourselves. This war manifests as guilt, shame, and cognitive dissonance, eroding our ability to think clearly, act decisively, and live authentically. The psychological consequences of betrayal are profound. When we act against our own values, we create a divide between who we are and who we pretend to be. This divide is unsustainable. It demands constant energy to maintain, energy that could otherwise be used to build, create, and thrive. Instead, it is wasted on maintaining a facade, on hiding the truth, and on silencing the voice within that knows better. This internal struggle is not just exhausting, it is destructive. It clouds our judgment, distorts our perception, and ultimately leads us to make decisions that compound our downfall. But the impact of betrayal extends far beyond the individual. When leaders, institutions, or societies betray the trust placed in them, the consequences are catastrophic. Trust is the glue that holds relationships, communities, and civilizations together. When that trust is broken, the fabric of society begins to unravel. People lose faith in their leaders, in their institutions, and in each other. This loss of faith breeds cynicism, division, and chaos. It creates a vacuum where truth should be, and into that vacuum rush lies manipulation and exploitation. The result is a society that is fractured, unstable, and ultimately doomed to collapse from within. At the heart of this discussion is the role of truth. Truth is not just a moral ideal. It is an immovable force. It is the foundation upon which all meaningful relationships, institutions, and societies are built. When we betray the truth, whether through lies, deceit, or manipulation, we are building on sand. And as the winds of time blow, the structures we have built will inevitably crumble. Truth has a way of surfacing no matter how deeply it is buried. And when it does, it exposes the falsehoods, the betrayals, and the corruption that have been hidden. This exposure is often swift and unforgiving, leaving those who have betrayed the truth with nowhere to hide. Yet even in the face of such destruction, there is hope. Betrayal does not have to be the end of the story. There is always a path to redemption, a way to realign with truth and integrity. It begins with recognition. The recognition of our mistakes, our compromises, and our betrayals. It requires courage. The courage to face the truth, to take responsibility, and to make amends. And it demands action. The action to rebuild, to restore, and to realign with the values and principles that we have betrayed. In conclusion, let us remember this. Betrayal is not just an act committed against others. It is an act committed against ourselves. When we betray our own values, our own principles, or the trust placed in us, we set in motion a chain of events that leads to our own destruction. But this destruction is not inevitable. By recognizing our mistakes, taking responsibility, and realigning with truth and integrity, we can avoid the consequences of betrayal and build a future that is strong, stable, and true. Thank you. The nature of betrayal is a concept that transcends mere actions. It is a reflection of the internal moral compass that guides human behavior. At its core, betrayal is not just about deceiving others, but about deceiving oneself. When individuals or groups choose to act in ways that contradict their stated values, principles, or commitments, they initiate a process of self-destruction. It's because betrayal is not a singular event, but a series of choices that erode the foundation of integrity. Every act of betrayal, whether it is a lie, a broken promise, or a violation of trust, creates a fissure in the moral framework that holds individuals and societies together. Over time, these fissures grow, weakening the structure until it collapses under its own weight. The act of betrayal often begins with justification. People convince themselves that their actions are necessary, that the ends justify the means, or that their circumstances are exceptional. This self-deception is the first step toward moral decay. It allows individuals to distance themselves from the consequences of their actions, creating a false sense of security. However, this distance is illusory. The consequences of betrayal are inescapable, not because they are imposed by external forces, but because they are rooted in the internal conflict that betrayal creates. When we act against our own values, we create a divide between who we are and who we pretend to be. This divide is unsustainable, and the effort required to maintain it drains us of the energy needed to live authentically and purposefully. The psychological consequences. The psychological toll of betrayal is profound and far-reaching. When individuals betray their own conscience or moral code, they experience a phenomenon known as cognitive dissonance. This is the mental discomfort that arises when our actions contradict our beliefs or values. To alleviate this discomfort, people often resort to further self-deception, rationalizing their behavior, or shifting blame onto others. However, this only deepens the internal conflict, creating a cycle of guilt, shame, and self-sabotage. Over time, this cycle erodes mental clarity, making it increasingly difficult to make sound decisions or maintain healthy relationships. The psychological consequences of betrayal extend beyond the individual. When leaders or institutions betray the trust of those they serve, they create a culture of cynicism and distrust. This culture permeates every level of society, undermining the social bonds that hold communities together. People become disillusioned, withdrawing from participation in civic life or resorting to self-serving behaviors. This erosion of trust is not easily repaired, and the psychological scars it leaves can last for generations. Moreover, betrayal often leads to a loss of self-respect. When individuals act in ways that contradict their values, they diminish their own sense of worth. This loss of self-respect can manifest as depression, anxiety, or a pervasive sense of emptiness. It can also lead to destructive behaviors as individuals seek to numb their guilt or distract themselves from the truth. In this way, betrayal becomes a self-perpetuating cycle, driving individuals further away from the values and principles that could lead to redemption. The societal impact, the impact of betrayal is not confined to the individual. It reverberates throughout society. When leaders, institutions, or governments betray the trust of the people, they undermine the very foundation of social order. Trust is the glue that holds societies together. It is the belief that others will act in good faith, that institutions will uphold justice, and that leaders will prioritize the common good. When this trust is broken, the social contract is fractured, leading to widespread disillusionment and instability. History is replete with examples of societies that collapsed under the weight of betrayal. From the fall of empires to the dissolution of governments, the common thread is a loss of trust. When leaders prioritize their own interests over those of the people, when institutions become corrupt, and when justice is perverted, the result is chaos. People lose faith in the systems that are meant to protect them, and they turn to alternative sources of authority or simply withdraw from civic life altogether. The societal impact of betrayal is particularly evident in times of crisis. When trust is already fragile, a single act of betrayal can have catastrophic consequences. It can ignite social unrest, fuel political polarization, and deepen existing divisions. In this way, betrayal is not just a personal failing. It is a threat to the stability and cohesion of society as a whole. The role of truth at the heart of betrayal is the rejection of truth. Truth is the foundation upon which all meaningful relationships, institutions, and societies are built. It is the standard by which actions are judged and the measure by which integrity is assessed. When individuals or groups betray the truth, they are building on a foundation of sand. No matter how impressive the structure may appear, it is destined to collapse. Truth has a way of surfacing no matter how deeply it is buried. Lies, deceit, and manipulation may provide temporary protection, but they are ultimately unsustainable. The effort required to maintain a false narrative is immense, and the strain of doing so often leads to mistakes that expose the truth. When this happens, the consequences are swift and unforgiving. Those who have betrayed the truth are left with nowhere to hide, their credibility shattered, and their reputations in ruins. The role of truth is particularly important in the context of leadership. Leaders who betray the truth not only undermine their own authority, but also erode the trust of those they lead. This loss of trust is difficult to regain, and it often leads to a loss of legitimacy. In contrast, leaders who uphold the truth, even when it is difficult or unpopular, inspire confidence and loyalty. They demonstrate a commitment to integrity that strengthens the social fabric and fosters resilience in the face of challenges. Redemption and avoidance, while betrayal leads to destruction, it is not an irreversible fate. There is always a path to redemption, a way to realign with truth and integrity. This path begins with recognition, the recognition of one's mistakes, the harm they have caused, and the values they have betrayed. It requires courage. The courage to face the truth, to take responsibility, and to make amends. And it demands action. The action to rebuild trust, to restore relationships, and to realign with the principles that have been compromised. Redemption is not easy, but it is possible. It requires a willingness to confront the past, to learn from mistakes, and to commit to a better future. It also requires humility, the humility to acknowledge one's flaws and to seek guidance from others. Those who embark on this path often find that it leads to a deeper sense of purpose and a renewed commitment to living authentically. Avoiding betrayal, however, is preferable to seeking redemption. This requires a steadfast commitment to truth and integrity, even in the face of temptation or adversity. It requires self-awareness, the ability to recognize when one is at risk of compromising their values, and the strength to resist that temptation. It also requires a commitment to accountability, both to oneself and to others. By upholding these principles, individuals can avoid the destructive consequences of betrayal and build a life that is grounded in truth, integrity, and purpose.